As we get ever closer to the spring calving season, it's time to think about how we can best save the most number of calves out of our cow herd this year. One of the ways, of course, is to provide assistance to those cows, or especially young heifers that might need some help. And that would be a whole lot easier if these cattle would have a high percentage of them calving during daylight hours. Well, there is a method that can be used that seems to encourage a higher percentage of the cattle to calve between, say, 6 a.m. in the morning and 6 p.m. in the evening. It's called the Konefel method, named after a rancher in Canada that back in the 70s discovered that if he changed the feeding time of his herd, that he seemed to encourage a higher percentage of calves to come in daylight hours. Research has been done extensively on this subject and tends to bear out what old Gus Konefel found out in Canada back in the 1970s. Most recently, some data comes from the Kansas State experiment station at Fort Hays up in northwest Kansas. They kept track of that herd over a 5-year period of time. And what they did was feed the sorghum hay every evening right around dusk. And they kept track of the calving pattern of those cows over that 5-year period of time. What they found was that when they did that, it looked like about 34% of the calves came in the 4-hour period between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. Another 21.2% came between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then another nearly 30% of the calves were actually arrived between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. That left only 15% of the calves that were delivered between 6 p.m. in the evening and 6 a.m. the following morning. That seems to reiterate some of the other research that's been done around the country that suggests that if we can move the feeding to evening, that we'll get a high percentage of these cows that calve during daylight hours. One of the questions that'll always come up, well, I put out big round bales where the cows have access to it 24/7. What happens if we just change the supplement feeding to around dusk or 5 o'clock in the evening? Research here at Oklahoma State tended to show that it had a similar effect, perhaps not as dramatic. We had a record of about 70% of the cows calving between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. when we changed the supplement feeding from earlier in the day until about 5 o'clock in the evening. What some ranchers tell me is that they have had success by controlling when the cows have access to the big round bales. In other words, they put the big round bales in the bale feeder behind a fence and then open the gate to that particular pasture in the early evening hours, and then the following morning run the cows back out of that area into their normal pasture grazing area until the following evening. And they have reported good success in terms of having a high percentage of the calves coming in daylight hours. It certainly looks like this method tends to work, will help us get a higher percentage of calves coming when we're likely to give them some assistance and have a little better survival rate from that particular calf crop. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on Sunup's Cow-Calf Corner.